Well, good evening and welcome to another virtual session of the Pullman City Council for this April 27th. Yes, there was hope, but then we went back to phase two, so we're still working our way through that. In the meantime, let's take roll, and Mike Urban, I guess that's your honor tonight to take roll, our city administrator.
Thank you. Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Chapman.
Present.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records.
Here.
Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, operational changes to the city's water system are scheduled to take place tomorrow, April 28th. This work may lead to water discoloration on some military and College Hill residents' rooms. So please visit pullmanwa.gov for more information on that. Again, Military Hill and College Hill. Everyone 16 and older eligible to receive the COVID vaccine. Pullman Regional Hospital still has openings for Thursday, April 30th. You can call Pullman Regional Hospital to schedule an appointment. This is free of charge, and your insurance is not needed on this. Pullman Police has received reports of a person contacting Pullman businesses and threatening to fine them for violating COVID-19 restrictions. The person identifies himself as Michael Dunnenworth, a COVID ambassador from Whitman County. Whitman County says there is no one by that name that works for them. Additionally, representatives from Whitman County would not be contacting any business about proclamation violations. The only agencies who would be contacting a business about a proclamation violation is the Pullman PD or the state regulatory agency that regulates that particular business. Well, tomorrow is Denim Day. And what is Denim Day? For the past 22 years, Peace Over Violence has run its Denim Day campaign on a Wednesday in April to honor of Sexual Violence Awareness Month. The campaign was originally triggered by a ruling by the Italian Supreme Court, where a rape conviction was overturned because the justices felt that since the victim was wearing tight jeans, that she must have helped the rapist remove her jeans, thereby implying consent. The following day, the women of the Italian parliament came to work wearing jeans in solidarity with the victim. Peace Over Violence developed the Denim Day campaign in response to this case and the activism surrounding it. And since then, wearing jeans on Denim Day has become a symbol of protest against erroneous and destructive attitudes about sexual assaults. In this rape prevention education campaign, we ask community members, including elected officials, businesses, and students, to make a social statement with their fashion by wearing jeans on this day as a visible means of protest against the misconceptions that surround sexual assaults. And Denim Day is tomorrow, April 28th. And those are the announcements tonight. With that, we now go to item number C on the agenda, which is a committee activities, CIP, TIP, and modernizing committees. Mike Urban.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, Council. As part of the Council goals and from earlier in March, updating and modernizing committees was one of the top priorities, and a situation has come up that's somewhat timely to bring a couple thoughts in front of Council as a presentation. And if action wants to be taken afterwards, certainly that's available to the Council. But the first item is the CIP-TIP committee. If many of you remember last year under COVID circumstances, that was pared back due to in-person meetings and the fact that we were holding on to our reserve funds in case we would need that to balance the general fund budget. The only general fund CIP items that were approved were grant related. Well, as we start to work on the process this year, coming out of last year, we've taken another look at the operations and came to the conclusion that maybe revisiting this under a little different circumstances might make some really good sense. So I wanted to bring that idea to the Council. In the past, the CIP-TIP, and for those at home, I'm sorry I didn't elaborate on that. That's our capital improvement program and our transportation improvement program. These are 6-year plans where we look at these large capital purchases and infrastructure items and put a 6-year plan together. And we renew that every year, dropping the year that just passed and adding another year on. So we're not surprised by these additional expenditures down the road because we can plan for them appropriately. So in the past, the CIP-TIP committee spent usually a full day, sometimes multiple, going over programs and different purchases to benefit the community. And their recommendation would go on to the Planning Commission, and their recommendation will ultimately go to City Council for a public hearing and approval of a final plan. Last year, the committee portion was dropped, as I said, but it's led us to believe that revisiting that does make some sense with a couple changes. Not so much a change as to the committee makeup of 2 council members, 2 planning commissioners, the finance director, the city administrator, and a community member at large who asks to be on the committee, and we solicit that information from, but more of a process change and taking that original plan when it is put out to the committee and the planning commission and the city council and pushing that out all at once to all 3. So they all have more time to digest and be able to ask questions. So the only thing they're seeing change going from step to step to step are the recommendations of the previous group, but they do have the full body of the document. The other recommendations are to make that a advertised meeting where people can attend, hopefully in person by then, based on our schedule. But that's already something that happens at the Planning Commission level as well as the City Council level. And then the last item is more for this is the streamlined portion of that committee. And instead of spending the day doing presentations, really coming into that meeting with those folks that have proposed items and answering questions from the work that the committee has already done the research on, and getting into the specific items to help move the process along a little bit quicker and build the confidence through the CIP committee to the Planning Commission, then ultimately to the City Council. And if that is an acceptable way to go forward, certainly we would hope that the council would approve 2 of their own to be on the CIP committee. If there's more discussion, there's certainly time for this. If there's other ideas, we would certainly love to hear that and maybe retool this a little bit, but this is what we came up with the staff as far as a possible modernization technique. And then a slight pivot on the additional portion. We've been watching how some of the additional committees to the City Council, such as the Arts Commission, Lawson Gardens Committee, Parks and Rec, as a couple of examples, are committees that don't have a council member on the committee or even ex officio, like Council Member Parks is to the library board. But if council were interested in appointing one of their own ex officio to a couple of these other ones, maybe that could help strengthen the tie between the council and the committees that report to them, as well as allow for the council member that is tied to that committee to present more regular reporting to the entire council body. So those were 2 items that we wanted to, the memo was much longer, but I tried to break it down. Brevity is my, not my middle day, but my New Year's resolution. So I'm working on things, but that's kind of what I wanted to put in front of council for discussion and see if there's any questions I can answer, if there's some direction they would like staff to take in bringing these items back to you, especially adding the ex officio members to those other committees, because we would have to do some ordinance changes.
Okay, Nathan, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, that's a great suggestion, especially with the ex officio. I found it when I was on the library ex officio as such a valuable experience, not only for the connection to those boards, but also for understanding all the process that goes in and the amount of work that these volunteers on these boards put in every single week, day, month. It's so important. So I completely agree with that. I think also the switch for the CIP-TIP committee is a great one. I was a little taken aback when I heard that it had switched originally, because I did feel that that meeting was very, very valuable. Having been on it before, so that's my input. I know I have the fewest assignments of the council, but I also know that both Brandon and Eileen had sat on the CIP before. So I just wanted to mention those things. So I felt that would be important. All right, that's all for me.
Okay, others. Brandon.
Yeah, Nathan, that's a good point. Having recently been on CIP, I thought the changes in theory, like on paper, I thought they looked just fine this last year. But I think as we've seen through some of Mike's examples, having a little more ability to be involved earlier in the process can certainly help alleviate or mitigate some concerns that come up before it reaches critical mass. And I know I've been saying for 2 or 3 years, I think we should look at all of our boards and commissions and let's start the process here and see what kind of headway we can make.
Eileen.
Yeah, I concur with everything that's been said so far. I really sort of felt like the change in the CIP was a little unexpected, and I don't think it worked out quite as well as what we may have hoped, just as Brandon said. So yes, I think these are excellent suggestions. I think placing people on ex officio positions within some of these other committees are very important, especially as we move forward here in our recovery period from COVID and activate some of those committees that have kind of languished just due to COVID and other circumstances. And if we energize those committees with a council member, I think that would be a really fine step in the right direction. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I'm hearing that we needed to get 2 members from the council to serve on CIP. And Nathan, you sort of hinted that you have not been on that one, but you mentioned Brandon and Eileen had been on it beforehand. So Eileen?
Yeah, it was just that one opportunity, and I'd be more than happy to serve again.
And Nathan, did you sort of hint that you would like to be on it because you had the least amount of committees?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did mention that. I also don't want to step on the shoes of Councilmember Chapman, who was on there originally. So I did want to at least give him the first decision on that. I feel that's respectful and important.
Okay.
Yeah. No, thank you, Nathan. I know that you in particular have made it a point to say let's share the love, and I want other people to get an opportunity. I'm fine with that. I thought it was a really valuable experience, and I would have loved to do it last year. But again, everything was just a little bit different. I'm not hung on it. So if you want to join Councilmember McCall, I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Nathan, you are willing to serve?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Mike, I think the CIP has been taken care of, and we heard positives towards having ex officio on others. We can work with our city attorney and dealing with if we need to have any ordinance changes, but I know that we did some other ones ex officio, and I think we were okay with that as long as they couldn't vote. So we'll check that one in. But we generally heard from the council saying that's a good idea to move forward with that.
Okay,
and
great.
Notice again the difference with this CIP versus with a modification. It is a public meeting. We want to make sure that was very clear in the public record. Before the CIP committee 2 years ago, it wasn't. So we've taken care of that particular area.
Sure. And thank you, council, because part of the intent is there's a planning commission meeting. So we'd like to get them tomorrow and if council was agreeable, certainly let planning commission do that. So there was a little time to this, but just for the rest of, for the better of the group, the CIP committee is scheduled to meet in late July. So we're still working on putting everything together. The first submissions aren't due until next month for us. So late July for the CIP committee, mid-August for the planning commission, and then it comes back to council either late August or early September, depending on meeting dates for public hearing.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. The council's had a chance to look all these items over ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There's a lot of unanimity in terms of that second, Laura. So now it's all yours. Laura
I
McAloon.
noticed. Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of resolution number R-25-21, a resolution accepting the bid of Mangum Construction LLC for Rainy Park Pool Complex improvements and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project. Resolution number R-26-21, a resolution accepting a water line easement from SEL Development LLC, a Washington limited liability company. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 102-891 through 102-964, totaling $957,730.40. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 102-983 through 103-044, totaling $143,129.07. And a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 67919 through 68239, electronic transfers 910, 698, and 703 through 708, and payroll direct deposits numbered 102-965 through 102-982, totaling $1,328,771.83.
Is there any item the council would like on for discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 5. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now move to the regular agenda. First up is an ordinance annexing the city of Pullman. And this is a continuation of the discussion. So RJ Lott, our planning director, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. This is a continuation of the item from our last council meeting 2 weeks ago on the annexation of property located east of Johnson Road, north of Old Moscow Road, and south of SR 270. You may recall this map that's on your screen now. The gray line there is the proposed bypass location, the south bypass location. So as a follow-up from 2 weeks ago, there was 2 questions directed towards staff. The first was, what was the current Whitman County zoning for this parcel? I contacted staff over at Whitman County, and they identified this area as currently zoned as agriculture. Single-family homes are permitted in this zone. There are no currently city services such as sewer or water available at this location unless it is within city limits. There is no minimum lot size in this zone. However, the minimum required by Whitman County Health Department for on-site sewage disposal would determine the minimum lot size. So for instance, if there were steep slopes or rocky terrain, that would essentially require a larger minimum lot size. If it was flat and had good soils for sewage disposal, then a smaller lot size could be possible. It does appear that the existing tax sharing agreement with Whitman County would not affect density or development at this location. If the city council finds that the current pre-zone of R3 is not appropriate and desires to have it changed, the following steps are suggested by staff. The first step would be to reject this current annexation application. The next step would be instruct to have the Planning Commission evaluate the city's current pre-zones, perhaps not at this location only, but throughout the rest of the city. The third one would be Planning Commission would need to hold a public hearing on the item and make a recommendation back to City Council on the pre-zone maps. And then lastly, the City Council will discuss and adopt any changes for a new pre-zone map by ordinance. I believe those were the two primary concerns of the City Council from 2 weeks ago. So if there's any new questions or comments, I can take those at this time.
Questions of RJ? Nathan.
More of a comment. RJ, I really appreciate the extra mile that you went to get all this together for us to make a, informed decision. So I wanted to let you know, I really appreciate that. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other comments? Any other questions? Dan?
I think my comment is that I I feel like with all of the feedback that we've received from the public, I feel like it's probably appropriate for us to take a pause kind of right now and follow what the recommendations are that RJ laid out. If we don't want to move forward with the annexation, and take a look at the pre-zone definitions, because it seems like there's a lot of confusion right now about what those pre-zones are with residents in the area, and I think we need to take a look at that. So I would recommend that we don't move forward with the annexation while we take a look at those pre-zone definitions again.
Nathan.
Yeah, I would agree with Dan as well, looking at those pre-zones across the city, because I think things have changed and continue to change so quickly. And I believe, and RJ, please correct me if I'm wrong, the last designation, if I recall, was around 2008, 2009, when we determined that. I may be wrong, but I think that was from last meeting. So
Yeah, it was from 2013, Ordinance 13-9.
Okay.
According to the map on my wall here in my office. So,
So
yeah, about 8 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I support what Dan was saying. Yeah.
Eileen.
Yeah, thanks for kind of opening up the floor on this, Dan. There has been a lot of public input on this, and I've pondered it very carefully. I think it is an opportunity here to take a pause. At some point, additional land will be annexed into the city, and we need to look at this particular pre-zone and a lot of the other pre-zones to know where we're going. We have almost a directive from the planning department to our planning commission department to look at a kind of a 50-year time horizon in terms of the comprehensive plan. And I don't see this immediate thing happening right now. It is not to the best welfare of the people of Pullman and the people of the region, especially. We've got to take into account the character of our community and the quality of life. We've got a lot of other things on the table right now in terms of improving our downtown, and this just does not meet the criteria of promoting the public health, safety, order, and convenience for the people of Pullman. We need to just pause on this and relook at that pre-zone.
Brandon, you had your hand up next. You'll need to unmute.
Let's go ahead and do that now. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think I would agree. What I've heard loud and clear, and of course, I'm sure with all of my colleagues here, didn't prejudge this, but it's, to me at this point, it's easy enough to judge based on what my constituents say, and we all answer to our own constituencies. But in this case, I think most of these folks that have responded and been part of this public hearing live here in Ward 3. They live close to this. And I think they've been loud and clear, not that we don't have a need. And I think RJ has talked about growth, if not in open meeting among us, we council members, and there is a need for growth. And I think the Planning Commission recognizes that as well. I've heard the term smart growth, and it's hard to measure what that actually means. But I think taking a pause and looking at these pre-zones and making sure that they are up to date, making sure that we maybe have an opportunity to view this within the context of a comprehensive plan that's forthcoming, I think could be very, very helpful. And so I've heard them loud and clear, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I feel compelled to listen to those residents and find a good path forward, because we are still going to grow. Like, we have to just make sure that we're going to do it the right way.
Al Sorensen, and then Ann.
I want to just talk a little. Is my audio working okay? Because I'm having a heck of a time tonight. Okay. I just want to point out a little bit of stuff here. Nathan, I believe you were on the council in 13. Pat, I think you were on the council in 13, and the mayor, of course, was here. And we voted, I believe, unanimously as a city council to approve this as a R3 pre-zone. And I know that we take into consideration all of that stuff very carefully. And 8 years ago is not that long ago when you think about it. And I do believe this, that when people buy property that is lying on the edges or outskirts of our city, and they are pre-zoned by the city council to be a certain zoning, and then they buy that with a possibility of a project coming, that I don't know how you change the rules of the game midterm. They've bought this property, or they've gone into partnership with this property, whatever it is, with the notion that this is a zone R3, because we just did it not very long ago. And I am looking at this entire request by what's been put in front of me in regards to the zone, the annexation request, which was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. Am I right, RJ?
Yes, that'd be correct.
Okay, and there was no public input at that Planning Commission meeting. There was no public input, I believe, in December when we talked about it. There was no public input in January when we voted. All of us here voted on this. I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of my thought process here. In my opinion, when an annexation request comes in, I've got to look at what that annexation request is. I can't, in my eyes, look past that to what they may or may not do with the property. Okay, that's the next step. And I have a hard time moving past that and changing and moving the goalposts in the middle of the game. So just my comments there in regards to this request for this annexation.
Ann Parks, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to start out by saying I agree with everyone who's spoken regarding the feedback we've gotten from the residents of the city. It is quite clear. I have not talked to one person or in person when we were talking about it, and they're saying, "Oh, that's a fine idea. It's okay." And what the concern about, as Councilmember Sorensen said, changing midstream, is exactly what we need to stop and consider. That's our job. We are hearing from the citizens of this and the residents of this city saying, no, we don't want this. And the reason we're hearing that is because a couple of years ago, the same developer who is applying again for, who is part of this planned whatever, they own the property still, let me say it that way. They had proposed a very large for that area in particular, apartment complex, it is not suitable for that area, not traffic wise, not environmentally. They had to ask for conditional use and variances. That tells me that their project does not fit there, or they wouldn't have to ask for those things. So I disagree that we are changing course carelessly. I think it's exactly the opposite. We are listening to what the majority of the people who choose to speak are telling us. And I do think it is our responsibility to stop and listen and explore a little bit more. So, and I, as far as the buyers, when they bought it and now it's being changed, I don't know. All I can say is that it's because we govern, we are the decision makers, and we have a responsibility to the residents also when we are making these decisions. And so, I guess that's how I feel. Thank you.
Okay, I got Brandon next, then comes Dan, and then comes Al. Okay, Brandon?
I'm going to unmute myself this time. Yeah, no, I fully, I do understand, Al. I understand your point. I think the issue that I take is that we don't have the complete information at that point. We haven't had the public hearing at that point. And if we didn't have to have that, then there would be no reason for it to really come to us. We would just stop at the planning commission. So I don't consider, somebody buying a piece of property knowing that there is a process, including planning, including annexation, to consider at all that they're vested in that at that point. I mean, it has to go through that process. And again, like I mentioned, it wasn't prejudged, but that's because I had to be able to hear the feedback that the folks gave. And I think that's also a respectful part. Yes, we want to be open and transparent with the person who's purchasing land, but I think it is incumbent upon us to hear or let that process carry out till the end, including that public hearing.
Dan Rucker's next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because, initially, I have a lot of the same thoughts that Al has expressed about, we initially pre-zoned this land. And the reason why we go through the pre-zoning procedure is to give an indication to potential developers, potential property owners of what the direction that we're thinking we're going to go in as we annex additional areas of the city. And I fully think that this particular area and this direction of area is ripe for annexation in the future. And I think, this is laid out with the corridor along the highway there that we intend to annex that eventually. But I think that in the time period between 2013 and now, conditions have changed in the area. There has been the addition of the pot shops that have centered around that area that has changed some of the conditions. And I think we need to think about how we move forward with annexing this specific area of the city, which I fully expect that we will do in the coming years. But I think we need to spend some time thinking about what are the conditions that we need to make sure are met before we allow expansion into additional high density zoning in this area. Most of the public comments have been around traffic considerations, which at the annexation level is not necessarily the appropriate place to discuss the traffic survey or the environmental impacts. That comes later in the process. And I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding among the public about what stage those things come into play. But I also think that, we need to think a little bit more holistically about this particular area of the city as we expand. And we need to think about things like what long-term plans do we have in place to mitigate the traffic implications of future expansion and future. Once we annex this, it comes in as R3, as in the pre-zone. And is the traffic and is the infrastructure in the area ready for that? Is it right for that at this moment? And I'm not sure that that's the case right now. And I think we need to spend some more time thinking about that and developing some of those plans for mitigating those additional impacts that future projects will have. And that's not to say like the annexation is just the annexation into the city process, and whatever proposal will still need to go through those checks and balances as we go forward in the planning process. But I think we need to think a little bit more holistically as we go forward, and especially with the comprehensive plan process that we're going through right now, I think we need to fold this all into a larger vision for how we are going to expand the boundaries of the city of Pullman. And I think taking a pause and thinking about those things a little bit more holistically is the right course of action at this time. I fully understand that, you know, it's the property in question is not the property of the city of Pullman. It is owned by somebody. They have private property rights in that property. But at the same time, you know, when we're talking about what is going to fit within the character and the infrastructure requirements that the city is going to take on by expanding into this area, we need to take all of those things into account as we think about this very carefully as we go forward.
Okay. And Pat, I'm going to go to Pat since she hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Then I'll go to Al. So Pat Wright.
Thank you, Glenn. And as always, you've been particular in terms of laying out the whole thing. And I agree with you 100% in that we have to be holistic in how we're looking at this. And I know the initial question was about annexation and that we were to be just looking at annexation, not what the next step or two after, you know, that process happened. But I know I'll concur with Al, 8 years is not that long a time. But when we consider the nature of the growth in that particular area in an 8-year period of time, it's just totally changed. And you referenced the pot shops. Those weren't even on the horizon in 2013, let alone having 3 of them. And then the other factor being the development south of town that has also created that additional traffic going down Johnson Road and over through onto Bishop Boulevard. And that's a good thing. I mean, we should be applauding that. But at the same time, I think we really need to evaluate what we want to do in the future. And is R3 density, is that the density that we want? Is that the density that we need, considering the nature of the growth that we're having in town? Is it R3? Should we be considering, you know, a different level of density, affordable housing, R2 residential perhaps in the area? But again, any of that is going to have to do on what we do with the infrastructure out there that mitigates so many different factors. I'm very sympathetic to the property owners, but I think that we have a responsibility to do what's right for the city as well.
Thank you, Pat. Al Sorensen.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Laura a question here in a minute, but you know, don't get me wrong, I'm totally into looking at what we're doing and what should be zoned and what shouldn't be zoned. That's not a question in my mind right at the moment. So I pose this. Well, let me just say one thing to Brandon. I mean, we pre-zone for a reason, and property owners buy property off of what we say for pre-zone. So if we're going to change it, okay, after they buy property, then why are we even pre-zoning? I'll just make that statement. That because then it makes no sense. If you want to zone it when it comes into the city, then that's when we should do it.
Yeah.
But here's my question.
Like I said,
of
that was
Laura.
a fair point. That's a fair point now.
Yeah. So here's my question of you, Laura. Is the city in any legal obligation or trouble because our reason to not zone this or annex this into the city is because the council doesn't like what the zone is or what the project's going to be that comes behind it?
No, It's a legislative decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to make some comment on this? Or Dan, since you came up with a solution on the pause, do you want to make the motion?
I'll make a motion that we reject the annexation and that we follow the recommendations that RJ laid out in reassessing the pre-zone of all areas of the city.
Second.
And you're referring that back to Planning Commission?
Yes.
Yep.
No. Well, on the discussion of the reassessing the pre-zone, I think that would maybe go back to Planning Commission. But the rejection of the annexation, I think, stands on its own.
Good. Yeah. Laura?
Mayor, I would agree. The rejection would just simply be the rejection of the annexation. And actually, it would probably be clearest if you broke those into two separate motions, one to deal with the annexation and the second to deal with the direction to your planning director as to what he should bring back to the Planning Commission to work on.
Sure, I would make the first motion to reject the annexation.
Second.
Okay, Nathan was a second up there, but I also heard another. Okay, we've got a motion a second, and okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
One nay. Okay, now you have a second motion, Dan.
So I would ask, does this need to be a motion or just direction to Planning Commission?
Well, the easiest way to give direction to the Planning Commission is by a motion of the council.
I would move to ask the Planning Commission to revisit and reevaluate the pre-zones that are defined in the current pre-zone definitions or pre-zone plans.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Brandon. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We have now finished with item number 1 on the agenda. Item number 2 is a resolution authorizing the execution of a radio repeater permit agreement. And with that, we go to Clayton Forsman, our Deputy Public Works Director. Clayton?
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jim Kuzner, a volunteer with the Amateur Radio Emergency Services for Whitman County, has been actively working with city staff to install a Wi-Fi radio to serve as a repeater for amateur radio use at our Water Tank 10 site, which is located at 1885 Southwest Barclay Ridge Drive. The radio will provide links to other repeaters in Pullman that are used for emergency communications and serve other general amateur radio uses. The radio is very small and it would be mounted on the railing on the top of the tank. No ground equipment is necessary, and power for the radio would come from the city's on-site water control house. In order to move forward with the installation of the radio, a radio repeater permit agreement was prepared by staff. Since the amateur radio group could not meet the insurance requirements in the agreement, Mr. Kuzner agreed to enter the agreement using his separate fiber optic company, which is Northwest Fiber Services, LLC. This agreement is included in your council packet, and the initial annual rent is $10.50 per year, and that's to reimburse the city for the estimated power consumption of the radio. Staff recommends adoption of the resolution to authorize the radio repeater permit agreement with Northwest Fiber Services, LLC. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Questions of Clayton on this? Al Sorensen.
I hope I don't get fried from all this stuff going on this water tank. I have a question. How many more requests like this do we have in the pipeline, Clayton, in regards to all of the tanks in Pullman and that kind of thing? Because as you as you drive around town and you look at our water tanks, they are, some of them are completely plastered in them and some aren't. And, you know, we want to make our city look good, and aesthetics isn't always the best. And, you know, then we've got other issues and things. So can you tell me how many other requests like this we have on other tanks in town?
Currently, Al, we have no other new requests. We frequently work with the wireless providers for changes on their sites. Sometimes they swap out antennas, but no new requests are in the pipeline at this point, and I'm not aware of any.
Would it be out of line to maybe take a look at all of this? I know that, Laura, when we started talking about this particular tank, the first request, you know, we had to do it. I mean, you were kind of saying that we were kind of required to do this stuff and that we couldn't stop not letting this happen. Or I mean, I'm not saying that exactly how you did, but you remember that conversation?
We did have one that was was it a renewal of the, I'm trying to remember which one you're talking about, council member. I apologize. There have been quite a few that came through. But there are, it is permitted. And if it meets the criteria for the permit, then there isn't really a basis to deny a permit.
Okay. I'm just wondering if this shouldn't be something, Clayton, outside of this request tonight, that we take a look at in regards to what we're requiring, what we're not requiring, what we're allowing, what we're not allowing. And I've got to be honest with you, $10.50 rent for a year is kind of laughable. Why not just give it to them for a penny? I mean, it's, I know this particular case is for a certain other reason. But, you know, when we look at some of these other lease agreements and agreements that we have, pretty good deal for us to build the tower for them and them just go put their antennas on them. So I would ask that maybe we do a little more background and research and reevaluating of things here, kind of like we're going to do with the pre-zone stuff.
Okay, any other comments on this? Dan Records.
Laura, for what is currently permitted with these types of antennas on the water tower, is that something that if we wanted to look at changing that, would there need to be a change in an ordinance? Or is this kind of at Public Works discretion on some of these things? Or what are we looking at in terms of what are the parameters of what is permitted?
Right, couldn't get to the mic. There are ones that are within the discretion. So this one, for example, the fee was based on Public Works calculating what the administrative cost was, right? Because it's a permit issued by the city. So what the city can charge is it's not for a profit-making purpose. It's to recoup the cost of the city administering it. And this repeater itself is a very small unit and isn't going to require a lot of manpower. There are provisions depending on the location and the zoning. It depends on where a tower would go or what it would attach to, but it really depends on the application, how it gets processed. And Clayton's probably in a better position to talk about the different types of antennas that the city gets requested to do. But they are revenue resources too to the city from those wireless communication providers.
Thank you, Laura. Dan, so this is a first for us, a radio repeater for amateur radio. This was the first time we've been requested for something like this. Everything else that Al is talking about are wireless communication facilities. So those are, you know, Verizon Wireless, Inland Cellular, those type of entities, and the zoning code permits those uses outright. Those fees are Usually, the last two we did are about $10,500 a year annual rent. So this is kind of a new request, and I worked with Laura's office on this to see whether we could permit this outright or whether an agreement was needed. And it was determined that agreement would be needed. This radio would fit in my hand. It's 12 inches long, 3 inches wide. So this is really just a small thing to help with emergency communications for amateur radio.
And I might remind people too that amateur radio is a very big part of our comprehensive emergency plan. So when all the cell phones go down, emergency amateur radio is the one's been able to communicate in tornadoes and other kinds of events. And so what they're trying to do is just to make sure they have communications in the city.
Yes, I'm well aware that my brother is on the the emergency committee for the Tri-County area around Olympia. So that's very important to keep in mind for emergency services.
Very true. Because I know they've been a big part of our emergency plan over the years. So if there's no other questions, going back to Al.
Laura, did you want to say something first?
Mayor, I just wanted to point out that the reason that it was determined that this one needed an agreement is because this type of a repeater didn't fit the definition of a wireless facility under the city code. So really you're leasing this small space, but staff believed that it was an important request to consider and bring to the council with the recommendation for approval.
Okay.
So I don't want people to think that I'm not in favor of having this radio antenna on there. I'm talking about all of this in general because it's here in front of us at this moment. Okay, so I don't want you to think that I'm against safety and being able to communicate in Pullman. That's not the case whatsoever. If these people or these antenna folks and radio wave people had to build their own towers, it would be costly. And there would be a lot of places else to go. So this was just because of this particular request that I was able to talk about this discussion, as we've just done in the last couple of months also. Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Laura, would you please read the resolution?
Resolution number R-27-21, a resolution authorizing the execution of a radio repeater permit agreement between the City of Pullman and Northwest Fiber Services, LLC for the construction, operation, maintenance, repair, and removal of a radio repeater at the Hawaii Tank 10 site.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 3 is a resolution approving a preliminary plat of Sunnyside Heights Addition 13. Once again, RJ Lott.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening once again, Council. So this next item on the agenda for this evening is a preliminary plat of Sunnyside Heights number 13. Here's the location on your screen. It's a preliminary plat covering 10.8 acres. It would contain 35 lots in 2 phases. The first phase essentially being the west half of your shaded area on the map. The current zoning for this location is R2, which allows for single-family homes, manufactured homes, duplexes, apartment complexes with a maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre. This item was before the Planning Commission on March 24th, 2021. There were 3 residents that spoke in favor of this application, and the Planning Commission had a unanimous recommendation of approval towards the City Council. If there's any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, we'll go to Al Sorensen.
I read through all this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What about the sidewalks? Brandon, you're laughing. I see you.
Ask the question.
Yes, so there will be sidewalks on both sides of Panorama Drive, and the installation of those sidewalks would have to be within 1 year of the final plat being approved by City Council. So not quite there yet. This will come back to you folks a little bit later as a final plat, and then the 1 year timeline starts at that point.
Okay, because, you know, this is in an existing neighborhood. It's in the center of something, and these sidewalks have to be put in, and we have to monitor this situation, and we have to make it happen. Okay, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
Move to adopt.
adopt. Second.
Eileen got it there first. So do you want to do a second, Brandon?
Yeah, that's fine.
Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-28-21, a resolution approving the preliminary plat of Sunnyside Heights, edition number 13.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Item number 4 is a motion to award the purchase of Motorola radios and installation through the state bid process to Day Wireless. And we have Chief Ray Lamoureux on the line, along with Chief Mike Heston. So I believe, Ray, you're going to take the lead on this since you do all the grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So back in August of last year, I believe it was August 18th meeting, Council approved us to accept the AFG grant that we were awarded on July 31st, which included purchase and installation of radios for all fire department vehicles and training for fire officers within the fire department. The training portion of the grant is already being executed, and we will actually be done with the fire officer training here on May 7th. Happy to report that so far we have 100% passage rate amongst all of our commissioned officers and acting officers. So they've been putting in a lot of work and navigating the testing process, which isn't an easy task. But the second part of this, which we're talking about tonight, is under the NASPO agreement, 06913 would allow us to execute the second part of this grant, which is purchase and installation of the radios under the state bid process, which would be done by Day Wireless. As you can see in your council packet, since July, or actually earlier than that, probably March of last year when Day Wireless first gave us the bid, the cost of stuff has gone up. Mainly of this 724606 that you see for the overage, most of that is in labor costs that has gone up. At this point, we are forecasting about $15,000 to be left over from the training portion. We forecast obviously for the stars not to align, and that we're paying maximum wages for our employees who are going to go through this. But with debits and shift trades and everything that impacts our department staffing, we're actually going to save roughly $15,000 from the training side. In the past, most recently, the AFG grant from 2017, we were again under budget for our training side, and we wrote an amendment or requested an amendment from FEMA to use the money for another class and to purchase some additional books. FEMA doesn't want any of this money back, so as long as the amendment you're asking for is in line with what your original grant request was, I've never heard of anybody getting turned down. So while the overage is, I would call it significant at $7,246, I'm very confident that the amendment that we would write to FEMA once the May 7th date has passed, and we can show them that there is money left over from training, that we're going to be able to absorb any overages with the extra money out of the grant. So right now, like I said, I think we're in a pretty good spot. Chief Heston and I have talked about this, and if for whatever reason FEMA were to deny our amendments, we are ready to absorb any of the overages out of the current fire department budget with no extra funds being asked for. So with that, I will take any questions.
Questions of Ray or Mike? And when Ray talks, just so you know the background, when Ray talks about he's pretty sure that the grant would be approved, you are on a lot of the grant selections committees for FEMA, so you have a chance to see a number of these grants, and you understand what goes through a committee and does not. So
correct.
Okay, if there are no questions, do I hear a motion on this motion?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. It's a motion to award the purchase of Motorola radios and installation through the state bid process for Day Wireless. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Item number 5 tonight is a motion to authorize M&O superintendent to purchase a new sewer vector truck from Owen Equipment under Sourcewell contract. Art Garrow and Justin Cohey on the line.
All right. Thank you so much, Mayor and City Council. I'm excited to be here for the opportunity to come before you this evening to seek approval for the purchase of a new sewer cleaning truck. I guess I'm even more excited to have my Justin Cohey, the interim maintenance supervisor, with me here to present to this evening. I will be presenting mostly on the financial aspects of the proposal, and Justin will explain the process of selecting the best truck to serve the Pullman community. An opportunity to ask questions will be provided at the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off. The 2021 Equipment Rental Department budget includes an allotment of $400,000 for the purchase of this truck. Unfortunately, the truck came in at a little bit more than $400,000. It came in at $483,249, a difference of $83,249, or roughly 20%. The reason for this overage lies in the projection I did as part of the CIP process in 2020. And to just be perfectly candid, I missed it. And that happens sometimes, but the prices. But the one thing that did come when we looked at the pricing and Justin met with many of the vendors was the pricing was consistently higher than what I had projected. So it wasn't, all those quotes and that just kind of proved the point that the problem was in my projection. So that being the case, the procurement of this unit is vital to the Maintenance and Operation Division. And to offset the increased cost of this unit and the impact on the ERD capital expenditure budget, I'm suggesting that the procurement of 2 Freightliner dump trucks scheduled for 2021 be postponed until 2022. Amounting to a budget reduction of approximately $210,000. Additional funds from the water in the amount of $3330, sewer $64,102, and street $15,817 will also be necessary. And that can be kind of confusing. So I'm going to just kind of step right there and maybe kind of explain that a little bit better. The ERD budget is the budget we purchase equipment out of. So in the ERD capital budget, there's an expenditure for the $400,000. We do an interdepartmental transfer because for this utility equipment, we don't collect amortization funds. It's paid for at the time we buy it. And so it's directly charged, and a transfer comes in from each of those utility departments into ERD. So in one thing, we have an increased expenditure in ERD, and we also have an increase in the amount of dollars we're transferring from each one of those divisions. So, and I wanted to make sure I said this. This is for Councilman Parks. The funds from the sale of the sewer cleaning truck will return to the water, sewer, and street division funds. And I expect that sale proceeds to cover about 10 to 15% of that budget shortfall. Before I turn this presentation over to Justin, I want to share my appreciation of my staff and the culture of continuously seeking to improve our service provided to our citizens. This is a very important to me, and it's very important to my staff. The process of purchasing this piece of equipment is an excellent example of just one of the continuous process improvements driven by our staff. With that support, with also the support and guidance of the administration, the mayor, and the city council. And it's something that excites me. And it's part of my makeup is to continually look for ways that we can do things better and the way we can save money. And this is a great example. And so that's why I've asked Justin Cohee to kind of present tonight to go over the process that he and the crew went to in determining what that best truck for the city of Pullman is. And so with that, I give you interim maintenance supervisor, Justin Cohee. Justin, you're muted, buddy.
It's all yours.
There it is. I got the mute button. Okay, thank you, Art. I'll get my screen share going. Okay. If this will work now. Okay, so as Art said, we're here about the sewer combination truck. And good evening, council and Mr. Mayor, and thank you for having us this evening. As Art said, I'm Justin Cohee. I'm the interim maintenance supervisor here at M&O. My role tonight is simply to kind of give you an overview of the equipment and kind of how our process went as a crew. And I will emphasize that the crew was the process. I had very little to do with it other than logistics. But first, I would like to thank the council for a previous piece of equipment that was approved that we recently received. That is the sewer mechanical rotter. This was the replacement of a 30-plus-year-old piece of equipment. And I wish you guys, all of the council members and the mayor could see the excitement in the crew's eyes when they were able to actually put their hands on this piece of equipment. That may sound strange because it's a piece of sewer equipment, but that shows you the dedication my crew has to it. So we want to express our thanks and gratitude for getting us that piece of equipment to start with. If anybody's curious about what that looks like and what that entails for that piece of equipment, feel free to come down. I'll give you the full tour. Just let Art or I know and we'll make it happen. Okay, so we'll get going here. A couple of things. We're just going to kind of talk about combination trucks, just a brief overview so we can kind of see what we're dealing with. We'll kind of touch on what we use our combination sewer truck for. It's not just for sewer cleaning. There are other facets to it. We'll go over a little bit about repair costs and kind of downtime and how that affects my crew and our operations. And then I'll kind of touch more on the process of the selection that we went through as a crew, which was pretty extensive. This started at the beginning of January, roughly when I took over this position in the interim. So this is a good picture. This is the Vactor brand that we ultimately settled on. The truck won't be identical to this, but it will be pretty similar. And we can paint it whatever color we choose. So you can see there's a couple of things to it. First, has a high vacuum capability. And by their definition, a combination truck is essentially a huge vacuum system with a secondary system of high pressure jetting capabilities. That's what allows us to clean our sewers to the full extent. The other secondary ability of this is removing the debris out of the sewers. So instead of simply washing the debris down the line, we're actually able to capture that debris before it even makes it to the treatment plant, which is kind of a two-headed coin. It allows us to not send as much debris to the treatment plant, which ultimately does affect their process. So having the combination truck as opposed to a simple jetting machine does provide significant benefits for us and our operation. Having both of these on one truck, the vac and the jetting, allows us to be a little more mobile, a little more versatile, a smaller footprint, I guess, is a way to think of it too, out in the city, as opposed to having two vehicles out to do one job. We're running with one vehicle. So some of the ways we essentially use our combo truck, we have what we call routine sewer maintenance. This is maintenance that we're doing all over the city at any given point. Typically, we're working in a top-down fashion. Pullman is 4 hills and water runs downhill. So we tend to move our sewer downhill as we work, and that's kind of our routine. Preventative sewer maintenance is what we kind of refer to as our monthlies. A lot of these are the siphon sewers that run underneath the creeks. These require a more constant maintenance schedule, typically a monthly schedule. Some other lines are 3, 6, 9, and 12-month schedules as far as the preventative maintenance goes. So a quick graphic, this just kind of shows us what we do with the Vactor portion and the jetting portion. So we're essentially putting the vacuum tube into the manhole. We're jetting up to potentially the problem, the blockage. We're bringing that debris back to the Vactor truck, and we're removing that debris out of the sewer lines instead of simply washing it down to the next line. Also, the response to sanitary sewer emergencies, or SSOs as we refer to them, is pretty critical with this truck. Having a timely response to these helps us reduce property damage to households when there's a sewer backup. And then the other thing is also public health. Many times manholes are overflowing. We have sewage running down streets, and that's no good. So having this vehicle in operation and having it be dependable really allows us to help in that public safety aspect as well. A final facet of it is hydro excavation. This essentially allows us to dig around utilities, our own utilities, as well as some of the other franchise utilities, and do it safely as opposed to using a backhoe or an excavator, where you have a little less flexibility with the equipment. And again, the removal of debris prior to reaching the treatment facility. So this isn't just helping our department. This is helping the wastewater treatment plant as well, having the ability of this combination truck. So I'll kind of touch a little on repair costs, but I won't bury everybody in numbers too much, and I'm also not an accountant. So increased repair and labor costs as the equipment ages. So we all know a vehicle that you drive day in and day out, as it ages, it begins to cost more to repair it. So as you can kind of see in this infographic here in the green, in 2014, we jetted approximately 150,000 feet of sewer lines that year, around 700 hours of runtime. And our total labor and maintenance costs were only about $8,800. And then if you take a look at the red ones in 2019, and in 2019, this was our current jet was 13 years old. We jetted approximately the same amount, 170,000, but the hour runtime was close. And our repair and maintenance costs were 42,000. So a pretty significant jump there in just a few years. And you can see, I didn't circle it, but 2020 is a pretty significant jump as well. There were some major costs involved with getting that truck back into operation. So downtime is kind of the unseen facet of this. Essentially, when the equipment's not running, we're not maintaining sewers properly, and that has the potential to create problems for a lot of people in their households. Everybody wants to see their toilet flush and be gone. On the other end of that, the productivity and maintenance obviously is going to decline with downtime. We're not going to be able to get to those monthly preventative maintenance sewer lines as effectively if our equipment is sitting in the mechanic shop, which we did see a significant increase in that downtime in the last couple of years. And again, this downtime, we don't see this in numbers, but it really inhibits our ability to respond to emergent situations. We have contingencies in place, but they are problematic. We have the storm jet that is pegged for stormwater work. But if we ever have to use it for sewer, we run a lot of risks of cross-contamination. So we really try to keep them as separate as possible. But it is a contingency for some facets. So the process of selection, this is kind of the important part for me that I have a lot of pride and I'm really proud of my crew for getting involved in this. So just a quick photo of one of the trucks we viewed. Oops, that was quick. We pulled a lot of these trucks into our shop, took a very close look at them, spoke with all the vendors. The guys asked a lot of questions. We also involved the ERD mechanics as well in this process. We felt it was important to get their input. They're ultimately the ones that work on the equipment, and all of that money that was spent and those labor hours and that other graphic, that was them. So we wanted them involved as well. So they typically had a representative at all of these demonstrations as well. So getting the crew involved, what I saw from them was it started to create a sense of ownership and buy-in as a crew to the equipment. And ultimately, this is going to improve the care for the equipment, and it shows the pride in their work. And then it ultimately showed me their commitment to customer service. And that customer service is to the citizens of Pullman, and making sure that their sewer lines are functioning the way they're designed to. We viewed nearly all available brands and options, and that's really the only facet I was involved in, was coordinating those. The crew really took on the responsibility of asking the questions and getting the information from the vendors. Another thing that this led to that I was somewhat involved in is our process and procedure improvement. This led to a pretty in-depth scientific conversation that I was actually shocked at, kind of evaluating how we jet sewers to make sure we're doing it the most efficient way possible, as far as water consumption and cleaning power. And that was part of this process, was evaluating each one of these trucks to ensure that we were able to kind of meet some of that scientific and physics related stuff to clean sewers the best way we can, and that we're not just wasting time sending a little bit of water down a sewer line. And overall, the discussions on these vehicles, we had a discussion after each one, and we talked about the pros and cons. Ultimately, when we viewed our last truck in March, we had a final discussion. The crew narrowed this down to 3 trucks out of the 6 or 7. We penciled out all of the pros and cons on the top 3, eliminated 1, and then had a really in-depth conversation on the features and the viability of each of those final 2 trucks. And ultimately, the crew did determine that the Vector brand in the first photo was the brand we felt fit all of our criteria as far as functionality and where we want to be in providing that customer service. And I will note that the crew never really knew what any price points were on any of these trucks they viewed. I wanted them to view the trucks from the operator standpoint and let Art and I deal with the financial aspect. And I really had not seen a ton of the financial quotes from a lot of these vendors either. I didn't want it to skew the crew's view of the equipment. I wanted them to evaluate the equipment based on the equipment and how it fits into us moving forward as a team. So final thoughts. New equipment equals less downtime and lower maintenance costs. That's pretty evident in most data you'll see. Our process of selection creates a sense of ownership for the equipment. The crew ultimately is going to want to do the job more and take care of their equipment with a new truck. Yearly maintenance costs decrease significantly with new equipment. Again, that's going to be shown in the data. And then our processes and procedures, they're going to see an efficiency increase with a new machine. So you're going to have less problems with pumping issues and things like that with a new machine. And with that, I will be able to take any questions.
That was probably one of the most thorough reports I have seen in a number of years, being the mayor of the city, and I really appreciate it. It was quite good.
Well, I was worried about taking too much time.
Well, I think I've never heard that kind of justification for a vector truck, and I've had a chance to watch them work, and these guys do a tremendous job with them. You mentioned about taking debris out. How does it do for cutting roots? Does have that equipment on there so I can cut roots in there?
Yes, so there are some sewer lines around town where we ultimately do have to use the jet truck for cutting roots. Ultimately, what I mentioned in the beginning with the mechanical rodder, that's typically what we've found to be the most effective with roots is the mechanical rodder. So that's why I would encourage anybody to come take a look to kind of see how that process works. But we do have the ability. There are some backyard sewer lines across town. We just don't have access to get other equipment in. So ultimately we're dragging hose and what we call the jet rodder attachment. And we send a jet rodder attachment down. It's got a little round saw on the end of it, and it rotates as it goes through with the water pressure, and that'll cut the roots out of the sewer lines.
Brandon.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Good to see you again. Thanks for the presentation. You had me at toilet being able to flush, so that was good. Yeah, I was just curious, and certainly, Al would have seen insurance cases that come through to the city, but if this would additionally help offset some of the issues that we have experienced, because that definitely affects people's lives, whether we pay out or not. I mean, it still is a disruptor. And so to me, being able to have an increase in technology, even beyond just the decrease in maintenance, I think is well worth being able to not have this continued disruption. And it seems to me like I see these more and more in certain areas of town. So thank you for the presentation, and I'm not sure if this will help with that because we still are dealing with some old infrastructure, but yeah, let's do this.
Well, I think everybody, every little bit will help with this new truck for sure.
Okay, we'll go to Eileen, then Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. This is terrific, and and I'm aware that we have two different pieces of equipment, one on the sewer side and one on the stormwater side. So I'm going to kind of jump ahead here. I'm sort of thinking CIP off into the future. How far out are we on needing a storm truck? It looks pretty creaky to me. It looks like it's on its last legs, but
it's likely getting close. Art might have a better idea of the time frame for that. I know we've started to have discussions about the replacement of the storm jet. So it's probably coming up soon. I'll let Art maybe speak a little more clearly on that one.
Thanks, Justin. Eileen, Council Person Call. I don't really have that off the top of my head right away, but I would say you're talking probably 6 to 8 years. And as we move through this, we're right in the CI process right now, as you know, and we'll evaluate that every year. I'm going to pay particularly close attention to the kind of the years that we started to have problems with this one, and compare that to the stormwater, because it's a lot of money, almost $100,000 in repairs over the last 2 years. And Ryan Lancaster and I are really working hard to try to come up with a system where we can better predict those, so that we get rid of equipment just before those repairs need to happen. And so we're putting that, but I would say, just to answer your question directly, it's probably 6 to 8, right in there.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I was watching crews today send the old camera down the old storm drains, looking at that out in front of my place. Had a chance to talk to the crews. Dan?
Thanks, Justin and Art. Appreciate the presentation. I think for anybody that's experienced a significant sewer backup, this is one of those pieces of equipment that when you need it, you really need it. And so I appreciate that. But also, I wanted to just kind of comment on your presentation. It was a little on the long side, but I think I really appreciate a couple of points that you made in there. The taking a look at that, comparing what as the equipment ages, what is the increase in the cost of the repairs? That really kind of crystallizes for me like the need to do this at this time. And also I really want to highlight, and I really appreciate you taking a look at and taking the time to consider the efficiency of the equipment, especially the use of water and not wanting to waste water as we look at water as a whole, and holistically looking at our aquifer, and like anywhere that the city can look at efficiency and not wasting water. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Ann Parks, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mayor.
And Pat Wright.
Thank you, Art and Justin. I really did appreciate this. And I did appreciate the time to it because it isn't something that we deal with every day like you do. My father was a sewer and septic tank man for his whole life. So I know the old timey personal side of it, but not the commercial part of it. So it was actually interesting. And I do appreciate the time that you took to involve the team and the employees who will actually be using the equipment and getting there, and just instead of just saying, well, here's a truck and there you go. And so just want to say how much I appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Wright.
And I was actually going to say the same thing. I really appreciated the process, the selection process that you went through, and the involvement of all of your team members. I mean, that really develops a sense of ownership and pride, and they have a vested interest in this now. So it's awesome going forward. Thank you, Justin, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Could even be a Vector interest in not just yeah. Could. Okay. Any other comments? If not, do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Vector truck is on the way, right? You got the order in already, ready to go, right?
Thank you all.
Justin and Art, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Under new business tonight, we had one notification that we had a person who wanted to speak to us tonight. I see an Ivy Wolterine on the line. I assume, Rob, that's there's Ivy. And again, we have 3 minutes under new business. Okay, so the floor is yours, Ivy.
So my name is Ivy Woltering. I live at 1025 Northeast Lake Street, apartment 2. I grew up here and I'm currently a senior at WSU studying environmental and ecosystem sciences. With that said, I'm concerned about the recent news report of a plan to trap and remove beavers from Pullman's waterways. One of the first things you learn in environmental science is the importance of beavers. They're considered what we call keystone species, which means they have a disproportionately large influence on the surrounding ecosystem relative to their population numbers. They literally engineer habitat for countless other organisms within Pullman's watershed. Pullman has surprisingly rich biodiversity, actually, and we ought to be proud of the beavers that make that biodiversity possible, notably free of charge. There are other methods of dealing with nuisance beavers, and their removal will almost assuredly result in costly unintended consequences. Yes, I agree that we should take measures to protect and secure the trees that pose immediate safety threats to Pullman citizens, but I'm concerned that Pullman officials have not fully thought this decision through. For example, where will the beavers be relocated to? They're extremely territorial creatures, so moving them will likely cause problems. I also understand that the city is worried about flooding downstream after removing the beavers, and the planned solution to this is to remove young trees from the shoreline. While I fail to see how this will prevent flooding, I also wonder what the city plans to do about the erosion problem that will surely follow. Were any ecologists consulted while coming up with this plan? Were any wildlife biologists or restorationists or even engineers consulted? I believe personally that the city ought to show us a detailed plan while allowing a window for public comment before going through with removal of Pullman's beavers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Nathan Willer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ivy, thank you so much for bringing this up. When I read this as well, my background, master's, is related to environmental science. It's more bioregional planning and looking at the interconnection of all the species, the wicked problems that it creates once species are removed. I would love to hear a little bit more on this. I don't know if Mike, if we can get a little bit of a presentation at a future date, or what the plan is entirely. I don't know if Mike is there. Let's see.
I will consult with the department managers that are working on this and see if a presentation or a memo or what would be the best way to describe and get some more information out to council if time is of the essence. Probably a memo would be best if it needs to get on an agenda. I think the 25th of May still has some availability.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, especially as Pullman moves forward with our interest in sustainability, environmentally conscious, this is really important for us to start paying more attention to. So thank you so much, Ivy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting me ask that. So,
all right. With that, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ivy, thank you. I appreciate you coming. I love to see that residents are willing to sit through a whole council meeting and that you're passionate about this issue. Mike, I saw the same story, I think, that a lot of people saw in the daily news, and I've seen down at City Playfields when I've been walking down there. Did we not send folks maybe from code enforcement to a special training in dealing with some sort of wildlife? I'm a little hazy on that, and I thought maybe you would remember. And did it deal with either removal or mitigation of these issues, or things that Ivy is talking about?
I know they went to some training, whether it was specifically on beavers or other wildlife. I would have to revisit that with them and I don't want to put words in their mouth without a little more
we have to check
feedback.
with Alan Davis, because Alan has contracted with specialists before on this. When we had the entire President's Grove decimated by beavers on North Grand a while back. So this is probably maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, when all the trees were basically taken down. And we have beavers right now on Terraview too, and that area as well. So
yeah. So I guess, Mike, if you don't mind finding out more, because I would love to know if it was dealing with just removal, or their training was dealing with other issues in coexistence or whatever it may be. I'd love to find that out.
Yep, I'll see if I can get a timely response. I'm sending the staff that's been in this group email a note to check in with me tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Then the next on the agenda is the adjournment. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys. Thanks.